Hey guys, this is Kai for It's Man's World FTM1. This is week 21. The topic is Don't Transition. So what exactly does that mean? It means, would I ever tell somebody not to transition? And if I had reasons to tell them that, what would they be? Okay, so this is kind of complicated. First of all, it's not my place to tell people what to do or what not to do. Very much, as I say, it's not anyone else's place to tell me what to do and what not to do. I have thought about this for a really long time, and I've anguished over it. So obviously it's important to me, and if someone told me not to do it, I'd tell them to go suck an egg. At the same time, while doing my best not to be a hypocrite, I have to admit, youth culture tends to be very eager to get into trends. They're very eager to find things that will allow them to develop community. Usually this is done through mimicry, which is how trends come along, like, let's list a few. Sock hopping, the punk movement, the goth movement, the emo movement, the indie movement, the leather rock movement, the big hair movement, flannel shirts. I mean, pick a youth culture from any time period, and I'm sure you're gonna find some sort of trend. Now, I can't go back in history far enough because trends are, due to their nature, short-lived and very much related to the culture of the times. So I can't go back to Egypt and say, voila, trend, because it's probably not documented. It's not a really big deal. But I bet you they had them. So I've mentioned this before, how I've noticed there's a really big number of preteens and teens who are coming out as trans. Now, I've watched videos of like children saying they don't feel that they're the right gender, and I get that. I felt that as a child. I just didn't have a vocabulary that would allow me to verbalize that. But it's hard enough being a little kid without dealing with gender issues. Particularly pre-puberty, where it's a lot harder to peg, though it's a lot more helpful to peg. But in my personal life, I know young people, younger than teen, who identify as gender questioning or gender queer or whatever, and I see them struggle and waffle between genders in order to not ruin their social life. And then I see teenagers who I know recklessly pursue anything that makes them special or different as a way of fitting in, which is a contradiction in terms, but whatever. And it makes me worry. I know I did a lot of messed up things when I was a teenager in order to fit in. So if I were to meet teenagers who said that they were transgender, I wouldn't tell them not to do it, because that's not my place. I would warn them it's not necessarily easy. And unlike most trends that you get to look back at the yearbook and laugh at the fact that you had funny hair or you wore funny clothes, transitioning is a lifetime commitment. A commitment that most teenagers cannot grasp. And I know a lot of us trans people really wish we could have started transition as a child or as a teenager, because it would have made our lives easier, we assume, in the long run. But consider high school. Consider how tragic high school is. even if you're normal, consider how tragic high school is. And by normal, I mean cis, straight, generally conformist. It's still fucking hard. It's still the hardest time of your life, except for 3% of people who are famous in high school and then most of the time quickly peter out. So consider that. Consider how the majority of people without added problems have a hard time in high school. And then add to that possible social ostracism, parental abuse, or maltreatment due to the fact that you're non-conforming, issues with gender, issues with sexuality, though they're not related, they are linked. I mean, it's hard enough. So, while I would not deter high schoolers from doing it, I would make sure to promote soul searching and honesty with themselves and with the cost that being a transgender person might bring. I know a couple of teenagers who are gender non-conforming or trans associated or identified or whatever. And they're dealing with a lot of stuff. A few of them are very lucky and they have parents who maybe don't understand but are willing to accept and pursue understanding. And of course, the sooner you try to transition, the sooner your parents can get used to the idea. Because if you've been cisgendered seeming for a long time, it's a lot harder for your parents to accept it. But also, if you're really young, there's a lack of credibility there. You don't know. You've had no experience. And if you're under 18, then your parents have legal control over you. And they can make your life a living hell if you don't comply. So I worry that teenagers might pursue transition, or preteens might pursue transition as a cure-all, as a magic pill that will fix all their problems. Or that they consider transition trendy and different and therefore in. And seeing the large volume of preteens on YouTube who say that they're trans, I'm not doubting them per se, but I'm doubting their ability to commit to a lifelong change as a teen phase. So again, I wouldn't say don't transition. I'd say, are you sure? I'd say, are you willing to pay the price? Are you willing to pay the price before you're legal? Before you can make medical decisions for yourself? Before you have control and autonomy in your life? Before you're out of the house? It's a lot easier for people to transition in college. They're over 18. Most of them, at least in America, live far away from home. And they have the ability to experiment before and after, figure out how to socialize, and suddenly surprise their parents at Christmas break. Hello, I'm the other gender, or I have no gender, or whatever. So I worry about the preteens that are trying to go through this. I worry, knowing my own childhood and experience, how hard it was just to be me, without adding sexuality to it, without adding gender to it, without adding religious opinion into it, political opinion into it. And it worries me how young these kids are, and not knowing how their parents feel about it, because most of them, be it before a certain age or after a certain age, it's very irrelevant what your parents think. Because, you know, there comes a time when you just assume you're right. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying you probably have an overinflated opinion as to your ability to reason and know things. If you really feel it's you, do it. But be really careful. I detest personally looking fickle, looking wishy-washy. And I know I have a tendency to be very impassioned about my opinions and my desires. And as I calculate and recalculate, I think very hard about things, but I speak about them abruptly and I end up looking wishy-washy. And it's very important for me that my gender identity does not become something like that. So for me, it's very careful orchestration in how people perceive me and my presentation and my gender, so that they take me seriously at face value. There's a lot of querying going on and a lot of consistency that requires concentration and effort, you know. And I know young people today, these are not traits that are inherent in them. Parenting is not on a norm functional, nor does it promote these kinds of virtues or habits or temperaments. This is a culture whose idea of socializing is sitting in a group, all of them on their phones, not actually looking at each other. This is a culture based on immediate gratification without considerations for long-lasting effects of any pursuits. Look at Facebook. Look at YouTube. Look at Tumblr. Look at whatever you want to look at that involves social media of any kind. You can send a picture of your naked body to random people in Persia with little to no consequence, for the most part. You can filter your Facebook so that all your shameless nightscapades go to only the right people, hopefully. There's a lack of censoring in youth culture today. There's also a lack of understanding social boundaries. How beneficial really is it for anyone to know what you eat for lunch, breakfast, dinner, brunch, midnight snack? Not hugely relevant. But society as a whole is seeking 15 minutes of fame because we've seen it. We've seen random videos based on hopefully real life that happen to explode. And people become famous for short periods of time. 10 minutes a day, a month, a year, whatever. I worry about the frivolity of youth culture and its effect on people who are seeking transition due to that mindset, as opposed to serious thinking, conscious thought, effort, and so on. I don't see a medical reason to tell someone not to transition. That's what their doctors are for, or a mental reason. If someone is not cut out for it for some reason medically, they should have medical practitioners of mental and physical types. That's what they're trained to do. I'm not. I don't have the ability to say that. I can't make decisions for anybody else. That's not part of my job, and hypocritical of me to do so. But it's a fear I have. So if I see someone who's a preteen who is actually involved in my life and not simply someone I see on the internet, I might throw a word of warning and say, are you sure? I'm not saying you don't mean it, but are you aware of the risks? Are you aware of the cost? Emotional, physical, mental, monetary? How it might alienate you in your career choices. Things like that. As adults, we're more capable of handling decisions that have big impacts in our lives. that require us for the rest of our lives to take shots, to deal with scar tissue, to deal with social problems and so on. Not everyone, but hopefully most people who have gender identity issues understand that. So I don't have any ability to tell them no, because I'm just not someone competent to do that. There is one person that I've met whom, given if it was remotely right for me to do so, I would strongly caution them against transition, because I think that there's a lot of other problems there, and possibly their doctor has misdiagnosed them as gender non-conforming, when it might possibly be related but unrelated. And I can't go into detail about that, but that's really the only person that I know physically that I would say, whoa, like, hold on now. There's a lot more going on than this, and maybe this is true, but it might just be a tip of the iceberg that you're gonna have to get rid of a lot of water to get to, you know? My biggest concern would be preteens and teens who are considering this, depending on their relationship with their family, depending on the type of family they have. You know, it's just something I would caution against. I wouldn't tell them no. I would just say, think about it. Really think about it. It's hard. And a lot of people on YouTube and Tumblr may not paint the most in-depth picture. There may be a lot of fluff, a lot of positivity, you know, nice things that people are doing. Hey, I got top surgery. Hey, look at my shots. Look at all my physical changes. But it's not standard for people to talk about the emotional hardships or the physical hardships, or in great detail, and say, hey, I lost my job or whatever. And the people who have undergone things like that don't normally have channels on YouTube. Meet people. Really get to see people who are going through this. Really get to hear their stories. What's really happening with them. Things that may not be so pretty. And consider your situation. Do you live at home? Are you independent? Can you take care of yourself? If no, how would your parents feel? Are you afraid to death of telling them? Maybe now's not the time. Anyway, this video is like 20 minutes long, and I am exhausted. But that is Sundays with Kai. Next week we're going to be talking about something. It's a free topic week. I have no idea what to talk about because I've had a lot of free topics. We'll see. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Everyone have a lovely week. And I will catch you next week for Sundays with Kai. Bye-bye.